I want to try to help you understand what this is all about. Because no matter how much anybody, Paul Mason, Anthony Chaffee, Ken Berry, any of the brilliant researchers out there, any of the brilliant journalists like Gary Taub, no matter how much any of them tell you that the whole cholesterol thing was a hoax from the beginning, cholesterol in all forms, shapes, and it was never clogged your arteries. It never was a cause of heart disease. It was a great, great vehicle to sell just a shit ton of drugs to the American people. And over the last 40 years or so, that has become so firmly entrenched in the narrative, in the general narrative of medicine. And it's been what all the doctors have been taught. It amazes me how few of them have actually shook their head and said, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. That can't make sense. I've known that. It was 30 years ago. I've had high cholesterol all my life. 30 years ago, my doctor put me on a statin. And it's a good thing that it caused me muscle pains that I had to get off of it, or I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'd probably be drooling in some nursing home with Alzheimer's, because that would have destroyed my brain. Some people would argue with whether it's not been destroyed up to this point. But so if you believe like I believe, that I don't care how you measure your cholesterol, I don't care whether you measure LDL, HDL, particle size, I don't care if you measure LP little a, I don't care what metric you use, those numbers aren't going to make any difference in whether, now this is my opinion. I mean, people will jump up and down and put me in jail for saying something like this because it goes so against the narrative. But my contention is this. The thing that causes heart disease is inflammation in the arteries. The cholesterol doesn't cause inflammation in any form, even if it's damaged small particle glycated oxidized LDL particles. They are not causing the inflammation which signals the body's immune system to send the troops to repair the damage. And that's when the cholesterol, when the lipoproteins get dispatched to the site of the inflammation or injury. And that's when the sticky stuff arrives to try to patch and smooth it over. Without the inflammation first, all the cholesterol in your bloodstream is bound up in lipoprotein particles. It's going this way and that way to every cell in your body to be used for the construction of new cell walls, to repair any damage, to sheathe the neurons in the neuron connections in your brain. It is the body's prime number one construction and repair material. And it does not stick to the walls of the artery. It does not go through the arteries as a globby fat mess. It goes through the arteries tightly encapsulated in a lipoprotein. And I'm going to show you a picture of a lipoprotein now, because pictures say a lot. And I have to hit this thing. This thing here, I don't know if, can you see the mouse? Yeah, the mouse is moving around on there. This thing here is what a lipoprotein particle looks like. So let's say this is an LDL. Think of it as a submarine. Now, one of the things a lot of people have heard, but they don't really get the significance of it, is that blood is what they call aqueous. blood is water-based. You ever try to stir up some vegetable oil in water? It globs up and it just sticks together. You can't mix grease and water, okay? Since fat has to be transported around the body in the bloodstream, triglycerides are fatty, cholesterol is fatty, all of the fat-soluble vitamins that we work so hard to figure out if we're getting enough of have to get around the body, and the bloodstream is the highway. But you can't just dump them right into the blood. They would all clump up, and then they would clog the arteries. So we have these things that are manufactured in the liver, and they're called lipoproteins, okay? And in this one, it looks like a ball. This one's cut open, as you can see, and the cholesterol, if you can see these little red dots, see these little red dots right in here, see all these little red dots? Those are cholesterol molecules, okay? See them? That's cholesterol. This whole big thing is not cholesterol. The little red molecules inside are the cholesterol molecules, and the little green things in there are the triglyceride molecules, okay? So this shows this lipoprotein jam-packed full of little cholesterol molecules and triglyceride molecules. And on the outside is something called a phospholipid. A phospholipid is a water-soluble compound. So if you take all this fat that you can't transport directly in the bloodstream, and you encase it in a sphere of phospholipids, which can dissolve in the blood and be carried in the blood, then the fat and the triglycerides are not exposed directly to your blood. They're carried in this, and let's think of this as a submarine or even a little delivery truck. What's inside the delivery truck, if it's raining outside, it's inside the truck. It's not exposed to the rain. It's protected. So this water-soluble phospholipid encased lipoprotein carries the fat stuff inside, and the fat is not traveling through your bloodstream. And if the fat isn't traveling through your bloodstream, how can anybody claim that the fat is clogging your arteries? It's not. And if a water-soluble phospholipid-coated boat, and I don't think you have any idea how small these things are, but compared to a red blood cell, which might be this big, these lipoprotein particles are this big. So if your red blood cells aren't clogging up your arteries, and they're this big, then a lipoprotein particle that's this big is not going to clog up your arteries either. So this is how it works. Now, this green little blob that you see on the outside, okay? Everybody see that? That green little blob right there is what's called an apolipoprotein, APO, something or other. You can have ApoA, B, C, you can have ApoB 100, you can have all kinds of different things, but the purpose of that little apoprotein that sticks to the outside, and each LDL particle has one of them, it's the license plate for the delivery vehicle. It lets the body know what in the world this thing is, because this thing has to dock with cells all over the body to unload some of these fats that it's carrying. It has to get these fats to every cell in your body, because if you're a fat burner, then you need these triglycerides delivered. And there's a lot of cells in your body. There's trillions of them. So you need if you're a fat burner, to get a lot of fat to the cells. Now, if you're a sugar burner, if you're eating mostly carbohydrates, it makes sense that your cholesterol, and they call this cholesterol. This is not cholesterol. This is a lipoprotein. This is a delivery vehicle. But they keep calling this cholesterol. And they even go so far as to call some of these things good cholesterol and some of these things bad cholesterol. Whoever made that up has no understanding of the chemistry of this at all. And it frustrates me, and maybe you can hear it in my voice. It frustrates me no end. No end. To keep hearing this stuff out of the mouths of what I thought were intelligent people. And to keep seeing that cholesterol clogs your arteries. Cholesterol clogs your arteries. That's almost as bad as you have 20 pounds of undigested red meat in your colon. I don't know where that fairy tale came from. That's impossible too. Nobody's ever seen this, quote, undigested red meat, but especially not the guys who do the colonoscopies. So this is the ApoB they're talking about. It's one protein. But here's the difference between an LDL measurement and an ApoB measurement. They both measure the same thing. They both measure, well, one of them measures the weight, the total weight of all of these particles in a deciliter of blood. Okay? Your LDLC is a measure of the weight in milligrams per deciliter. So when you get an LDL of 100, it means you have 100 milligrams of all of these things in your bloodstream for every 10 deciliters, or 100 deciliters, I'm sorry, of blood. ApoB, this little green splotch over here, when you count ApoBs, you're not counting the weight of all of these. You're counting how many, because I don't care how big this lipoprotein is, it still only has one ApoB protein on it. That makes a difference because that's telling you more the particle count of your LDL particles as opposed to the total weight of them, because I think we've all heard that the best kind of LDL to have is the big fluffy kind, because they say because it's big and fluffy it doesn't stick to the walls of the artery. That's BS as well. If you just compare the size of any of these things to a red blood cell, it dwarfs the red. I mean, they're tiny. They're tiny. All of this stuff that they come up with to tell us how bad cholesterol is and what it does to us, and that's forcing everybody to think that they got to keep lowering it. They got to keep lowering it. And while we keep doing this to ourselves as a human race, the rate at which we're getting sicker and fatter and more diabetic, and nursing homes are filling up with people who are losing their minds. People can't think because their brains are being damaged by the lack of cholesterol. And we still want to push it lower and lower. And we still keep coming up with better and more effective ways like PCSK9 inhibitors, which if you think a statin will lower your cholesterol, wait till you get your hands on this baby. We'll get your cholesterol down to 30 or 40. And, as you're laying there in the morgue, they'll say, man, this guy may be dead, but God, he had such great cholesterol numbers. I mean, they got it backwards. So it frustrates me. I heard Anthony Chaffee the other day on one of his Q&As. Actually got frustrated, almost angry, because people kept asking him questions about cholesterol, and he keeps trying to tell people, forget it. It doesn't mean anything. It's all bogus. It's all wrong. Ken Berry does the same thing. People say, well, here are my numbers. My HDL is 50, and my triglycerides are 70, and my LDL is 700. And he goes over, he talks about their numbers, and he says, yeah, don't worry about that LDL. I subscribe to that. And I can sit here all night and tell you why. But I thought it would really be helpful, maybe be helpful to people who watch me, to try to clarify some of the nonsense that we take as fact in this world of ours. It's bad enough we get bombarded with all the political crap that's just wrong. It's just propaganda. People get swayed by that. And that's how I started this little thing. I started this thing by saying that you don't know who to believe. So you got a choice. You either have to enroll yourself in college and take a lot of courses in this stuff and hope that you actually get a professor who knows what he's talking about, and a textbook that isn't full of errors and wasn't printed by the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda University, or listen to the people on YouTube, and a lot of them have doctor in front of their name, that make sense to you, because there's more doctors on YouTube that are selling crap that's going to kill you, but they're doctors. Then there are doctors on YouTube that really understand this stuff and aren't trying to kill you. So I don't know how much more. I'm not going to do this all night here on the LDL, but I did want to explain the difference between what a lipoprotein is, what ApoB means, the difference between an ApoB measurement and an LDL measurement. One is by weight, the other is a count. And I'll finish this out by just saying that yes, it's not good to have glycated, oxidized, small particle lipoproteins. Because they're small, they can get caught up in the roughness of inflammation. And yes, they can contribute to cardiovascular disease, where that is still not causal on its own. And you got to keep in mind, there's a big difference between correlating something, and that's the old arsonist fireman analogy. I'm sure you've all heard that. If you haven't, I've said it in many of my videos. I don't want to tell that story again right now. But the fact that LDL, some of these lipoproteins, can be damaged and ruined and shrunk and lose their ability to be recognized by the liver when they should be taken back into the liver. The liver doesn't know what they are, and they're left in the bloodstream, and they can't accumulate. It's not the fault. It's not LDL that's the problem. It's what damaged the LDL that's the problem. Okay? Let me say that again. The LDL in a healthy human being who's on a carnivore diet and is not eating a lot of sugar and is not eating a lot of seed oils, whose HDL is going up, whose triglycerides are coming down, who's losing weight, whose diseases are going away, who's curing his metabolic health, his LDL or hers is going to be healthy and fluffy and doing exactly what it's been doing in animals since before the time of the dinosaurs. Our biochemistry existed way back then. It still worked. So much of it still worked the same way. The mammals, the little tiny mammals that lived at the time of the dinosaurs, more than likely also had lipoproteins and red blood. And most of the other biochemistry that we have, it's been working all this time. It works well enough to survive nature's test because we're here. It didn't all of a sudden change its mind and become poisonous to us since Ansel Keys decided so. And yet here we are. How do you explain it? And if you say anything against the conventional wisdom, they label you as a denier. That's politics. It's just, honest to God, it's just set up that way, and it is very, very frustrating. If you're unhealthy, if you're eating a ton of sugar and seed oils, and you weigh 350 pounds, and you're a diabetic, chances are you're loaded with small damaged LDL particles. It's not the LDL's fault. It's the sugar's fault, because the sugar glycates the LDL and in a lot of cases gloms right over that ApoB protein. And when that ApoB protein is trying to fit itself in that docking bay on the cell to let its fat out, the docking bay on the cell says, I don't know what you are. I don't see the license plate. It oxidizes. They shrink. And then they become a problem. The problem is not the level. So if you, in the final logic of all this is, if you're a healthy person, it doesn't matter, I don't think, how high your LDL is. It's exactly as high as every function in your body that needs the stuff that's delivered by these lipoproteins. It's exactly how high it needs to be for you to maintain the health you're in. Not any higher than that, not any lower. We regulate that very tightly. Okay? If you're not a healthy individual and your ApoB is very high, that's an indication that you better do everything in your power to become a healthy individual before, because that's when you're going to get screwed up and get heart disease and get heart attacks. So why is ApoB any better of an indicator for cholesterol levels than just the LDL one, when neither one of them, however high it is or low it is, in a healthy individual makes any difference, because it's right where it's supposed to be? And that's my take on it. And well, that went a half an hour. I'm going to give you all the rest of the day off and tell you to eat meat.